Okay, not sure why, not sure why, not sure why this is necessary. Hi there. You know, some of you, if you're among the nerdy, the nerdies of the nerds, like myself, may remember a video I did a while back. Maybe it was even more than one video about the history of the Aquarian Tarot. The Aquarian Tarot was my first ever Rider-Waite-Smith style deck. It was my second deck. My first deck was a Crowley-Harris, a Thoth deck. Then I moved on to the Aquarian Tarot. This is probably 1988. I mean, I was very young, and it was a deck that I wish I still had, that particular copy. One of the scalloped back mid-80s decks. I have one of those decks now, not the one that I owned back then, which disappeared into the hoary reaches of dim historical time. That deck, the Aquarian Tarot, I mean, you know, if you're not new to my channel, you know I tend to be pretty airy, quite swordsy. Even though I'm a Cancer Gemini in terms of astrology, although I don't know much about sun signs or astrology or any of that, but I tend toward the reaches of the stratosphere in my approach to life, right? No surprises here. And there's something about the Aquarian Tarot with its Art Deco kind of flat imaging, the white or pale, because it wasn't pure white in the early editions, faces, the sense of static, regal posture, the quietness of the deck. It touched me really deeply as a young woman. And it was really my gateway into tarot, into the tarot that I would go on to become increasingly obsessed with over the years. And yet, these days I don't read with the Aquarian Tarot hardly at all. There's one exception. I have a deck that is reserved for reading about the state of my dog, Opal. It's my Opal reading deck. I don't know why. Opal is not Aquarian. Well, maybe she is. I don't know. Anyway, the Aquarian Tarot. So, you know, my opening question is why? Why would US Games release in 2024 a new Aquarian Tarot? And why would they do it the way they've done it? Makes no sense to me. Before I show the most recent edition of US Games, and I adore US Games, and I say lots of lovely things about US Games decks on this channel, but just spoiler alert, I am not a fan of this reissue of the Aquarian Tarot. I think it was a missed opportunity on every score. But I'll say more about that in a moment. Let me just show you some of my historic decks, and I'll refer you to the really exhaustive historical discussion of the publishing history of the deck that I've done before. I'm not going to repeat that, but I just want to start with, you know, 1970-ish, okay? The first editions of the deck, and they're more than one. They have these Ouroboros backs. Now, the images on the front remain almost the same with some exceptions. As you'll see in a second, there is a brief period where in, you know, I'm going to say 74, I could be a little bit off, the very next editions of the deck don't have numbers on the majors, but otherwise the images inside stay the same. The format, the size of the deck pretty much stays the same. The quality of the cardstock, which is very thin, quite flexible, springy, but very thin, that pretty much stays the same. Everything stays the same, but the backs are different. So there are these Ouroboros decks, and they come in a variety of colors. I was lucky enough to get this off of eBay. The other thing that stays the same, essentially, is the little white book. Notice that the early decks were published in Hastings-on-Hudson in New York. Later, they're published in Morgan's Ferry. That's one of the Ouroboros decks. I also, thank you, Melissa Zupon, I think you were the one who gave me the pink with the orange backing, or maybe it was, yeah, I think this is the one you gave me. I love this deck. It's a beautiful rendition of the backing. These colors are really sweet, and this version, it's a little bit yellowed. It's in really beautiful shape. Love it. The pamphlet's basically the same. Hastings-on-Hudson. The next versions of the deck come out with blue, cobalt blue backs. This too is Hastings-on-Hudson. Cobalt blue backs. The two-part boxes remain almost exactly the same. The first cobalt blue backs, as far as I can tell, don't have numbers on the majors. Again, everything else is the same. The differences among the various editions in the 1970s and the 80s are really small and mostly either changes to the back. It's very common to see these 1974 on or 1972 on blue back editions of this deck. But nothing else really changes until the mid 1980s, in which case you get my favorite version of the deck. Again, the boxes are almost identical. Sometimes the writing on the four sides is a little bit different. My favorite version of the deck, which is what I got in, let's say, 1988, 1987, thereabouts, is the one with the scale backs, borderless. Again, the internal coloring. Siri's talking to us. Again, the internal coloring, pretty much the same. Difference in coloration that we see is mostly, I think, due to age. But essentially, we have an off-white. We have an off-white deck. Now, in the 90s, we get what may be my second favorite version of the deck. Cardstock shifts. This is the version that comes in a box that looks like this. It's going to say copyright 1970, which was the initial copyright of the deck. But this is, I think I came down to, this is 1994. There's no, oh, there is a barcode on it. Tuck box. What's inside, now we get a more white tone, and we get full bleed on the backs. The cardstock is improved. It's a little beefier. It's a little more plastic. It's a little bit more glossy. And you can see it seems to have been sharpened up a bit. But very, very similar. If you can get a copy like this on eBay, this is a nice deck. And it's very, the cardstock, that kind of very flexible, slightly glossy, slightly slick cardstock is a pleasure to use. Sometime after 1994, and I can't remember, maybe I never knew the precise date. Maybe I did and I've just forgotten. But at some point after the mid-90s, in the 2000s, I think, I could be misquoting myself because I did the research at one point, and others have done this research. US Games decided to make the cardstock very stark white and to create borders. And they've been doing that ever since. And when I say create borders, I'm not talking about the inside of the deck, which David Palladini's artwork has always had borders. I'm talking about the backs of the cards, okay? It is that design choice that is ruling this new box edition. This box edition includes a beefy guidebook, which is a reprint of the 1985 edition of Psychic Tarot by Craig Junjulas. Not sure. I'm not sure. Okay, Psychic Tarot. That now comes boxed in with the deck. Good price point. I think it's $24.95. Am I right? I could be making that up. Not sure. It doesn't say on the box. I can't remember. But a good price point. You include that book with the deck. Unfortunately, it's got that binding that is a little bit hard to read, and I think when we crack it open, if we crack the back, I think you risk having the cards fall out. But it is glossy paper, which is either a plus or a minus, depending if you're someone who likes to write in pencil. That's hard, but with pen, it's nice to write on glossy paper. And it's full color. That's nice. It's the same text as this 1985 edition. I got this very inexpensively secondhand some time ago. I don't know how hard this is. It may be that this book, it's certainly out of print until this edition, but I don't know how hard it is to get a copy of it. I prefer the larger, easier to read format, even though it's black and white. I prefer a more papery paper rather than plasticky paper. Talk a little bit more about this book in a second. Let me talk about the cards. So they come in one of these boxes with the ribbon. Okay. Not only do they have the white border, but the color is a real muted departure from the original. And this is what US Games has been doing with this deck for a while. And I don't know why they toned this blue down. So the coloration on the inside the card is similar to the 94. It's starker white than in the more vintage ones, just to compare and contrast. This is maybe slightly colored from age, but I don't think very much, given the way the white reads on the back. I just think this is a little off-white. It's a little softer. It's a little more gentle. But certainly the backs, right? One thing I will say is an improvement over the 94 deck is that we no longer, in the 94 deck, we have copyright on the side. US Games has heard our desire not to have copyrights. So that's lovely. That part is an improvement. We've got numbers on the majors, that's fine. Most of the editions have that. But we still have this starker white than the vintage, and we have, again, I don't know why, we have the bordered backs with the paler blue. I don't know why. And when US Games could have done something about cardstock and made these linen, I mean, not everyone loves linen, but a lot of us love linen, or done something else with it. That choice was not made. Now, maybe they're working with the estate of David Palladini. You know, I mean, it's a fucking awesome deck, right? It's a fucking awesome deck. I love this page of cups. Nothing that I don't love. Oh my goodness. Hold on. I just noticed a difference in the font. So there's another change here, and I don't know if this change was made in other recent versions. So no copyright, but also do you see the more ornate kind of details in the font? So they must have made a decision to make the font more readable. Yeah. Yeah, this is the mid-80s deck, right? So they made it more readable, a little bit less Art Deco-y, or maybe it's more Art Nouveau-y. Maybe this is more Art Nouveau. I don't care. I didn't find the earlier font hard to read. That change is, to me, kind of 6 of one, half dozen of the other. I do like that they've removed the copyright. Of course, there's no copyright in the mid-80s. So why? Why US Games? Why do this now? Is this an improvement? The cardstock, it's fine. This is good. This is US Games, really standard, good cardstock. But why? So one reason why would be to say, let's put it in a, this is a deck that's now becoming popular again. Let's make this out-of-print book available. But this out-of-print book is really of a moment. I mean, it's a guidebook. He refers to the meanings in this book of the actual cards. So when he's talking about the star, he's talking about David Palladini's star. He says a peacock, a symbol of beauty and immortality. So he's directly referencing this imagery in this book, Psychic Tarot. But this book, Psychic Tarot, the purpose of this book was to form a bridge, written in written in 1985. The purpose of this book was to form a bridge between the work of psychic development, and by psychic, the author is talking about intuition. So the work of developing our intuition on the one hand, and the tarot. So he was writing at the same time that, Mary Greer, Rachel Pollack are showing us how the tarot can be this tool for self-transformation. He's doing so from the lens of how we develop intuition. So he has this section, which is perhaps the most useful section of the book, called Intuition and the Tarot. He says the inclusion of intuitive information in a tarot reading is the difference between a card reading and a psychic tarot reading. The weaving of free associations, visions, intuitive thoughts, and other forms of insight can provide a tremendous boost to the tarot reader's accuracy and ability to apply information from the cards to important moments in the seeker's life. And then he goes through looking at different cards to talk about how to read the imagery of those cards in a way to spur intuitive growth. So he's kind of showing us how to read a tarot card, how to look at visual imagery and to pull out meaning. So for instance, he points to let's see. Okay, so he's pointing to a pentacle in this Six of Pentacles, and he's saying, receiving a bonus or gift. Small pentacle over figure's right shoulder looks as if it has loosened from the other three and is coming down to the sitting figure. So he's saying, look, this pentacle looks like it's loosened. It's dropping down onto his shoulder. And so it indicates maybe receiving a bonus or gift. He's showing us in examples how we look at images within a tarot card and use them as prompts for our own intuitive hit to help the querent, to help the person that we're reading for. And he's saying, look, this is the way that the tarot can help with our intuitive development, can help us develop our intuition. He also talks early in the book about the triune, the three-part structure of a human being, body, mind, and spirit. He's open to the ways in which we might have a more sciencey orientation, a more spiritual orientation. We might be more materialistic. We might be less materialistic. He's really trying to provide us a way from whatever standpoint we are, whether we're more psychologically or spiritually minded or more scientifically minded, to come to the tarot and see how its imagery can help us become more intuitive, psychic in the sense of more intuitive. That's great, but mid-1980s, that kind of support might have been really helpful, really necessary. I think most of these ideas are things that the tarot community has long already assimilated. Now, the readings of the individual cards, that might be helpful, but it's not like this is a must-read classic text that we all must assimilate, because we've already assimilated its truths. Does that make sense? Yeah, I mean, I say that. Is that too harsh? It might be that this would be helpful if you were coming new to the tarot. It might be. It's certainly a sound way to approach things. Call out too to this mid-70s text that also uses the the Aquarian tarot as its illustration, which is a little bit harder to find, but gives you a sense of how readings unfolded in the 1970s. So the moment right before Junjulas wrote Psychic Tarot, what the mid-70s, the same time that the deck was actually produced, how readers thought about reading at that time. This is a book that actually contains transcripts of readings performed in the 70s. It's really quite fascinating and enriching. No question in my mind that the Aquarian Tarot was an incredibly important tool in the renaissance of the tarot in the 70s and the 80s. And no question that it remains this gorgeous deck that, just as I'm holding it in my hands now, I'm like, ooh, maybe I need to be reading with this more. It's a deck that I've put aside a lot. So I am actually going to do a deck dialogue with my brand new US Games version of the deck. But I do just want to come out on the record and say, US Games, why? Why now? And why these choices? And to say, oh my Lord, I would love to see a reissued version of the Aquarian Tarot on your best, US Games, I hope you're listening, your best linen cardstock with borderless deep blue backings and maybe with a matte blue edging. A gal can dream. All right, I'm going to shuffle and then I'm going to do a reading. Okay. So, new US Games, Aquarian Tarot. In this, your latest iteration. What do you have to show me? Okay, so you're helping me. I mean, some of this is just about legacy. There's so much that this deck carries for me. There's so many ways in which it shores up my history and helps me head toward the future. You're reminding me of this deck's importance in my history. This blankness of the cloak and the facelessness of the characters, except for the little boy who's looking back at us. You want me to walk through a portal, don't you? You want me to walk somewhere. You want me to head somewhere. Is that right? You want me to, perhaps keeping an eye on the past, but to be able to walk through, to walk forward, to face forward. Ten of Pentacles is one of those cards I have trouble with. Maybe you're here to help me understand why. And you're saying, yes, there's a kind of community here, a kind of joint project. And you see how this deck, though, I mean, even a card that's so much about motion and joy and celebration and community, the women all look, well, we only have a full expression of one of them. There's not so much joyousness, but that burst of yellow at the top of the card, the watercolor, there's a flatness, of course, to the depiction style, but that watercolor gives some depth. But you are saying here something about the heart and community, ways in which you're inviting me into something. But what are you inviting me into exactly? And how, at this time in my psychic development, in the development of my intuition, what are you inviting me into exactly? Oh, okay, so a kind of energetic play and response. This is not a very combative Five of Rods or Five of Wands. The characters all seem rather static, but there is a sense here again of community and action and being in the fray. Conversation. Are you opening up a conversation? Helping me have conversation with the world? Certainly with my certificate program, which, by the way, if you're interested in spending a year in really strong community structured mentorship, learning a lot about the bones of tarot, really honing your own individual tarot voice, check out my certificate program. Info in the description box below. Starting a new cohort in June. So maybe you're referencing that. I didn't even mean to do a kind of a kind of promo here, but maybe you're referencing the kind of community and dialogue and how you can play a part in that or help me access that. Yeah, you're saying, yeah, exactly. Queen of Rods, that you can help me be the Queen of Rods. This is not a fiery deck, though. This is such a cool deck. So how in the coolness of your structure, of your voice, how does that help me exactly? Oh, you're saying it's going to stabilize me and give me some King of Cups support and stability for that world of spirituality and emotionality. Yeah. Let's pull one more card. Tell me what I'm missing, and then I'm also going to then look at what the guidebook says about that card to give you guys and myself too a strong feel of how the guidebook, now included with the deck, how that works. So Seven of Pentacles, a card that's about patience, a card that's about letting things come to fruition, which may be one of the ways this deck works with its quiet, soft, the watercolors, which even though it's watercolor, the watercolors feel airy, give this deck a lot of air and spaciousness. So Seven of Pentacles. Okay. A young person stares intently at 7 pentacles growing on a bush. The large center pentacle suggests the nearness of the harvest. The figure's cap, with its triangular design pointing toward the back of the crown chakra, is secured by a thick chin strap. Yeah, the author of the Psychic Tarot talks about chakras at the beginning of the book. The gloved hand rests lightly on a goosehead cane, creating an image of petting a bird while waiting patiently. So, then we get the meaning. Success in money matters and financial rewards are forthcoming. Denotes ingenuity and hard work and the success that it brings. Can indicate the need for making financial decisions and exercising patience and perseverance. Then we also get a reversed reading. Feeling alarm and anxiety in regard to money matters can point to impatience, lack of effort, or wasting time. So I would say the description of the card I found really insightful and helpful, pointing out really good images and in keeping with the way that the Psychic Tarot is trying to teach us how to read imagery in tarot. The meanings with this focus on success and money and financial matters may be a little reductive. But it does, it's a reasonable guidebook keyed into the imagery of the deck. So for that reason, having it in this nice price point package is good. But still, US Games, missed an opportunity. Why? All right. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for sharing this with me. And thanks too to the folks at US Games for entrusting some decks to me for me to take a look at and to share with all of you. As always, thank you so much for your practice. Take good care. Toodles.